You know, when we think of great leaders, we usually picture the ones who command the spotlight. But what about the ones who lead through just unwavering loyalty and service? So today, let's talk about the incredible story of Prophet Joshua, a figure whose legacy is really defined not by power, but by a deep and abiding faith and trust.
To really get a handle on Joshua's leadership, we've got to go all the way back to the beginning, back to his time as a devoted assistant. It's actually in that service where we find the real roots of his greatness.
So our story doesn't kick off on some grand battlefield, but in the shadow of another great leader. We start with a devoted apprentice, a young man whose name you'll see pretty much laid out his entire destiny.
His Hebrew name, Yehoshua, means God is salvation. I mean, just let that sink in for a second. That's not just a name, it's a mission statement. And what's really interesting is that it wasn't even his original name. Moses himself changed it from Hosea, stamping this divine purpose right onto his identity from the get-go.
You know, when you look at the scriptures, he's almost always defined by his relationship to Moses. He's called Moses' servant, or the young man. And look, these aren't just job titles, right? They paint this incredible picture of someone who was all about humble service and just being a constant, energetic presence. He wasn't waiting for his turn in the spotlight. He was loyally serving right there beside it.
He was just always there, a constant, reliable presence during the most critical moments. When Moses went into the sacred tent of meeting, Joshua stood guard outside. When Moses went up Mount Sinai, Joshua was right there with him. Even his very first taste of command was in service to Moses, leading the fight against the Amalekites while Moses prayed. He was constantly learning, constantly serving, preparing for a role he had no idea was coming.
Okay, so serving in the shadows, that's one thing. But what happens when you have to stand up for what you believe in, especially when you are completely outnumbered? Well, this was Joshua's defining test. This was the moment that changed absolutely everything. All right, so the moment of truth arrives when Moses sends 12 spies, one from each tribe, to go scout out the Promised Land. Joshua was picked to represent his tribe, Ephraim, and their mission was simple: go see if the land is everything God promised it would be. And when they get back, oh boy, the reports are all over the place. 10 of the spies come back with these terrifying stories. They're talking about powerful giants and unbeatable cities, basically painting a picture of an impossible mission. And that fear, it just spread like wildfire, filling the whole community with doubt and despair. But in the middle of all this panic, two men stood firm, Joshua and Caleb. While everyone else saw these massive obstacles, they saw what God had promised. They passionately pleaded with the people, urging them to look past their fear and just trust in God's plan.
And this is where it gets really, really interesting. The whole generation that gave in to fear, they were condemned to wander the desert for 40 years, never reaching their destination. But Joshua and Caleb, for their unwavering faith, they were rewarded. They alone would be the ones to finally enter the Promised Land. Their faith, quite literally, became their key to the future.
So you see, that moment of loyalty, that was the turning point. It proved that Joshua was ready not just for some position of power, but for the immense responsibility of true leadership.
Now, this wasn't a political appointment or some promotion he earned on the battlefield. It was something way more profound. It was the transfer of a sacred trust, what's known in some traditions as an emanat, a divinely given responsibility. Right there in front of everyone, Moses laid his hands on Joshua, officially passing the torch.
And what I find so fascinating here is that God's first command to Joshua wasn't about military strategy or how to conquer cities. It was all about spiritual integrity. He was told to be strong and courageous by staying true to the divine law. The message was clear. Success wasn't about military might, it was about sticking to your faith.
As the new leader, Joshua's greatest victories weren't just the result of his own skill. They were seen as manifestations of divine will, and they often unfolded in ways that, well, you could only describe as miraculous.
Okay, so 3 big ones really stand out. Can you imagine standing before the overflowing Jordan River, the very first obstacle to the Promised Land, and just seeing the waters part so you can cross on dry land? Then, of course, there's the famous story of Jericho, where these impenetrable walls just crumbled, not because of battering rams, but after days of faithful marching and prayer. These weren't just military wins. They were seen as profound divine signs.
But the one everyone talks about, right? The day the sun stood still. During a critical battle to defend their allies,
Joshua and his army were literally running out of daylight. They desperately needed more time to secure the victory before the Sabbath started.
And this is the absolute key to understanding this story. It's not about a man with the power to stop the sun. It's about a faithful leader whose prayer was answered. Joshua prayed for more time, and in response, the sun and moon stood still until the battle was won. It was this powerful sign that God was right there, fighting alongside them.
Okay, so you might think Joshua's story ends there, in the ancient past, but it doesn't. In a really surprising twist, his spiritual legacy is most tangible today in a place that's miles away from the Promised Land, a beautiful hill overlooking the Bosphorus in Istanbul.
And what's so cool about this part of the story is how the tomb was even found. It wasn't some big archaeological dig. The story goes that a respected Ottoman scholar named Yahya Efendi had a dream where Prophet Joshua, or Hz Yuşa, as he's known in Turkish, revealed the location of his grave. To confirm this vision, he found a local shepherd who pointed to the exact same spot, saying his sheep would just mysteriously never graze there. This combination of a spiritual dream and an earthly sign was all the Sultan needed to build a tomb on that site.
So, if you go there today, the first thing that's going to strike you is its size. It's incredibly long, measuring 17 meters, which is about 56 feet.
Which, of course, leads to the big question. Why is it so long? Well, the belief isn't that he was actually that tall. Instead, the length is symbolic of something much, much deeper.
Well, for one, the incredible length is seen as a physical way to show just how immense his spiritual stature was. It's a grand gesture of respect. Another interpretation is that the tomb was built to cover the entire sacred area that was revealed in the dream. Today, he's revered as one of the 4 spiritual guardians of Istanbul, which is just a testament to his incredible enduring legacy.
So in the end, Joshua's story really makes you think, doesn't it? What makes a leader truly great? Is it the lands they conquer or the power they hold? Or is it the quiet strength of unwavering loyalty, the courage to have faith when everyone else is afraid, and the integrity to faithfully carry a sacred trust? And that is the quiet, powerful legacy of Prophet Joshua.